So I'm going to split up this review into two parts. The first part is going to be spoiler free, and the second part is going to be spoiler full. So I watched Alien Covenant on Friday, the day it came out, and to put it simply, I actually didn't think it was bad at all. Um, I wouldn't say I thought it would think it was great. It's not amazing, but it's actually not bad at all. I've seen a lot of other reviewers seem to believe that it's horrible. They say it's horrible, Um, but I disagree with that. I actually think it's fine. I think it's definitely better than Resurrection and Alien 3. To be blunt, I feel like that this movie is pretty much what I wanted Prometheus to be. You know, I don't like Prometheus. There's a lot of reasons I don't like Prometheus. It's not necessarily a bad movie. I think that the theatrical cut messes things up a little bit, but overall, it's not a movie I really like. I would have preferred something more like Alien Covenant, but Alien Covenant comes out really well. It is absolutely appropriate for coming after Prometheus. It's exactly what I would have expected, or it's exactly what it should have been coming from Prometheus. Maybe I have a better attitude because when I went into it with a bad attitude. I was thinking that it might be horrible and I might have to commit horrible violence. So maybe that, because it surprised me that it wasn't horrible, is the reason why I have an okay attitude about it. The acting is on point. Once it gets into it, the characterizations come out a lot better, and you start feeling more for the characters. I think one of the problems is that on YouTube you can find 3 prologues that you really should watch before you actually go and watch the movie, because they give you just a little bit of extra information. They're real short, but they're necessary. And they may have been intending that the marketing for it would mean that most of the people who saw it saw them as well. Which I tried to avoid spoilers and stuff like that for things I'm real excited about, so I didn't watch any of it. And that sort of under-prepared me. And so if you're going to go see it, I definitely recommend you watch those 3 first. And if you haven't seen Prometheus, I would watch Prometheus, because it ties in really well with it. Like I said, overall it's pretty good. It takes up about to the it doesn't get exciting till about the end of the first act, because it's kind of slow and there's a lot of character stuff. And to be honest, during the first act, I was really frustrated. I was getting angry at it because I was rolling my eyes. I thought this is stupid. Nothing was happening. Then once the end of the first act came up, then it started getting exciting. I started, there's suspense and all that. It was fine. I was actually wanting to watch the movie to see what happened. And it's by that point where you actually see the whole point of the movie, because it's not a normal alien movie, which is what I try to insist to these people. It's not a normal alien movie. It is Prometheus 2, basically. Although I think he wanted to do something different, but because of the fans, we insisted for an alien movie. So you at first think it's going to be like a normal alien movie, sort of. But then it changes it up, because it's really about the origin of the xenomorph, the history of them. It's a continuation from Prometheus, and I assume that they're eventually going to tie it into the original Alien. If they don't, I'm still fine with that. But ultimately, that's what it's about. It's about the history of the xenomorph and how it ties in with the engineers and how that ties in with us. It's actually really good. It ties in really well. Another thing is Michael Fassbender is great in this movie. If you like Michael Fassbender, then this is definitely for you, and he does an excellent job. So if you like him, I would say definitely watch it for that. The horror bits are kind of cliched, but I feel like that's mostly because Ridley Scott, he did Alien in '79. He did it 40 years ago. So he's playing from an old book. It's like if Rage Against the Machine made an album again, and then someone said, oh, they sound like they're from the 90s. Well, yeah, because that's where they're from. So I can't expect for him to really be, new on this horror thing. I don't expect him to to ground break anything. I can't say that, even watching Alien, there's a few things that you could argue that's a bit cliche. There's a cat scare in it. Aliens is amazing. Alien is also amazing. I'm not going to criticize either of them, but I'm just making a point about that. So, the horror aspects are a bit cliche, but it's still pretty entertaining. The plot twists are not really twists. You pretty much know what's going to happen. You're like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But it's still excellent. There's still nice suspense and there's action. It's pretty good. The only bad part about the action, really, is that it does drag on a bit, because there's a sequence near the end, and then there's more to the end. Like, it's almost like a double climax. Like, you have what should be the climactic fight, then some stuff, and then another climactic fight, and that kind of drags on a bit. So it's not horrible. The story part of it is really good. I love it, and the ending is absolutely fantastic. You really do need to watch it. Watch the prologues. Make sure that you've seen Prometheus, and maybe brush up on it a bit, and then watch this movie, and then at least sit to the end. If you don't like it for the most part, sit all the way to the end and see it, because it ties in really well with itself and with Prometheus. It's definitely not bad, and if anyone says it's horrible, that it messes up the origin of the xenomorph and all that, they're idiots, okay? Because the origin of the xenomorph was mystery. Some books tried to come up with elaborations. Alien vs. Predator, the movie, came up with something. There's all kinds of theories, but this is the one that kind of gives it a more definitive origin, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm fine with that. What would you expect from a prequel, other than answering questions that you didn't know from watching the original? Mystery is fine. Mystery is great. But at the same time, it's cool to learn about something, to have a universe expanded on, because that's why you want more movies. If you don't want a universe to expand on, then it should just be one movie, one thing, and that's it. If you're going to expand a universe, expand it, and that's perfectly fine. And I think it's a good origin. I like the origin. It's very interesting, and it's poetic, and it's philosophical. And the other thing is, I think people worry too much about the action or the horror part of it. It's a sci-fi film. Ridley Scott, he also did Blade Runner. And it does make me more willing to give a fair cop to Prometheus as well. Not only that, but Cinema Wins also did that as well. But overall, I would say it's worth a watch. I'm definitely going to watch it again. I'm probably the biggest Alien fan there is. Maybe not the biggest. I mean, I don't have like a rifle, not for nothing, because I've actually looked up instructions on how to build your own working version of their pulse rifle, but that costs like a couple $1,000s to do because of all the parts you have to cut up and modify, because it takes parts from a SPAS 12 and all that kind of stuff, and then the custom bits. I'm not that kind of fan, but I mean, it's my favorite movie series. I've got my face hugger plushie, things like that. I want a chest burster plushie too, and it's one of the few things that I actually have a few memorabilia things for, just because I like it so much. It's my favorite movie series. H.R. Giger is my favorite artist. I got art books from him. It's just my favorite. And so, being probably a bigger fan than any of these other reviewers, and I'll say that with a straight face, I am a bigger fan than any of them, and I'm going to give it a fair cop. I think it's at least worth the watch. If you like sci-fi, hey, cool. If you like Michael Fassbender, definitely watch it. Those are my two main suggestions. Or if you liked Prometheus, definitely watch it. If you didn't like Prometheus, watch it and compare them. See what you think, because I think it's what Prometheus should have been. So definitely check it out. Now, on to spoilers. Okay. The biggest spoiler, I guess, the biggest thing that people like to talk about is the fact that David is the one that makes the xenomorph. He's the one that makes the xenomorph as we know it, or generally as we know it. There's a few things that are different that people complain about, which I think is completely ridiculous. You're complaining about stupid shit, okay? You are complaining about nothing. Cut it, okay? I like the fact that they have David make it, because it has this fantastic philosophical thing where the engineers make humans make David makes something, and it ties in really well with not only with Prometheus, but it ties in really well with Alien, and even Alien 3 and Resurrection by extension. He creates it as the ultimate life form. Well, what does Ash, an alien, call it? He calls it the ultimate life form. Well, they're both synthetic, so of course that one synthetic's idea of the ultimate life form is going to tie in with another synthetic's version of the ultimate life form, or at least opinion. And it actually works out really well. Not to mention, it gives a great explanation as to why it works the way it does, and to why it has acid blood and things like that. It's an awesome defense mechanism, and if it was designed like that, then hey. And it gives the reasoning why they have a queen structure, because, one of the little parts of his experiment, he shows like a little, black goo, or whatever you want to call it, insect. And so that would explain where it got the queen structure from. He designed it that way. And, it also gives it, good reason why it's so compatible with humans, is because they were designed to be, to have some sort of connection with humans. And not to mention, the whole ultimate life form thing is kind of meta, too. Not only do you have the dude from Alien 3 who, he was crazy, but he, worshipped it and helped it. And then he's got the dude from Resurrection who was all weird about it, and the newborn. But it would actually explain how the newborn thing is even possible. It would explain how, why with the cloning process and all that, why Ripley's DNA can get mixed with the xenomorph, is because there's this whole thing where they're related. It works kind of well like that. And like I said, there's the meta thing. We love the xenomorph. We see it as the coolest movie monster. It's the ultimate life form for us too. We almost worship this thing. And so maybe it's making fun of us, who knows, but it's a good meta thing. I like it. I think it's perfectly fine. Some people complain because the gestation of the first chest burster is not like a normal chest burster where it's like a snake. It's like a tiny xenomorph. That part was a little kind of silly the way they did it, but it could also be called an imperfect prototype. Whatever, And the other thing is, people complain about the fact that the facehuggers pretty much almost instantaneously impregnate them, and then it's not long that they chest burst. And while that does not mesh with the Alien and Aliens canon from video games and other things in the series, it meshes well with that. Again, this is his prototypes, his test whatevers. So maybe he changes them up a bit. Maybe it's the specific situation, or maybe the new canon is that they can gestate very quickly. Those are really, really minor things, and I don't think people should base why the movie's bad for that. But overall, I like it. And the best part about it is the fact that he wins in the end, because we kind of expect him to, because we know the xenomorphs. There's whole 4 movies about them. You kind of expect him to win, but you kind of want him to win, because Michael Fassbender plays David so well, and there's just a little bit, you want him to win, you want him to succeed, and they have this whole colony thing. The funny thing is, I actually called it, there's a whole colony, and they end up getting killed by the xenomorph. Well, you know what it is? It's alien Oregon Trail is really what it is. The way he ties in with the colony comes by. The story's not about the guys in the colony. It's not about those characters. It's not another story with another Ripley type character, or with someone, a bunch of people work together. It's not anything like that. It's about David. He ultimately wins. He takes control of the colony, and now he has thousands of people that he can experiment with and perfect his creation, the xenomorph, the alien. Yes, it's a fantastic ending, and it ties in so well, the way it's written, the way it's acted, and just the cinematography, the thematic elements of it. It works really well. I like that part of it. The beginning of the movie with just the colonists is really boring, and I hated it, especially because I didn't see the prologue stuff, but ultimately it comes out okay. Once you realize that they're not the focus of the story. Now, some people complain about some of the actions that they take are stupid, but I also like to point out they're not like the people in Prometheus who were scientists on a scientific expedition. They're colonists. Yeah, they have the skills to like run the ship and all that, but as soon as they get off, they start talking about places to build things. They're not concerned really with trying to make sure that there's the right level of nitrogen in the air to make it non-toxic. They're colonists. They don't think about stuff like that. One of the guys is smoking and he just throws the butt out. I mean, come on. You know, he immediately starts littering on the planet they're thinking about making their home. They're not. Yeah, they may be stupid, but they're not. They're freaking just random colonists. Okay, let's calm down about that. When the action starts kicking up with the what they call the neomorphs, there's a funny scene where in their like med bay or whatever of the drop ship, blood gets all on the floor and two different people slip on it. Some people call that, like, they say, oh, hey, that could be out of Three Stooges or something like that, which I think it's fine. I think it's realistic because it's a smooth floor and blood is slicker than water even. So you're panicking, having this gremlin-like thing trying to murder you. You're not going to be able to keep sure footing. You're trying to run, you're panicked, you're going to fall down. It's a little funny, I'll admit, but whatever. It's realistic. Who cares? Michael Fassbender plays two different parts. He plays Walter and he plays David. And he plays it so well. You can tell they're two different characters. He plays them so well. And then at one point, there's a twist that's not really a twist, that David is pretending to be Walter so that he can, so he can take over the ship with his experiment thing. And, well, not only is it kind of an obvious twist, but also the way he acts it is so well. Like, he acts like David acting like Walter. It's the nuance of it is absolutely astounding. I think it's A+. A+ acting. A++ acting. It's fantastic. Because you can tell he's trying to act like Walter, but he doesn't have the exact intonation and characterization down. He's just slightly off, If it wasn't for the fact that it was such an obvious twist, it would be one of those subtle twists, but regardless of that. As I said, the horror elements are cliched. I mean, there's even a scene where two people are fucking in the shower and they get killed. Like, that's been cliched since Friday the 13th. That's such a cliched killing. But it's okay, because who cares? It's the xenomorph. I'm glad to see the xenomorph back. Okay, I'm glad they're not getting punked out. I'm glad that they don't have boring ass deaths, and that's how I feel. It's something, and it's better than I expected it to be, which I'm just so glad about. They do have the main central female protagonist. She does a good job. I don't think she's bad. She doesn't copy Ripley too much, but it does feel like it's kind of continuing a trend. But again, with all the other cliches, we'll let it go. The worst thing about the action, the action's fine for the most part. It's definitely the bloodiest and the goriest of the Alien movies. So he definitely worked with what he had, and there's a lot of CG in it. But the big problem with the action is that there's one scene where the first xenomorph that gets popped, this is the phrase I'm going to use, and they fight it on the drop ship, and this is kind of this long drawn out battle, and it's hard to see because she's like hanging from a rope trying to shoot this thing until they finally capture it, and then she's able to. It lasts for a long time. It's hard to see. It's a little bit confusing. And the worst part about it is, the movie's not over, because after when they have the quiet scene, it doesn't feel like a conclusion. So it's going to keep going. And then there's another xenomorph. And it's like, then they have that epic fight where they ultimately fight in the cargo bay with that thing to shoot it out the airlock. Because it's the only way to be sure. And you're like, it's another epic battle with a xenomorph. Didn't we already have this? I think that the scene with the first one it should have been cut like way sooner. Like, they should have been able to kill him like almost immediately. Like, it jumps on the ship and it go and they're like, everything's okay. No, it's not. Rather than have this long drawn out scene and then have another. I mean, and then have another big action scene. It's it's unnecessary, and so it feels like he's piling on. It's like, Scott, you're piling on. Okay, you've got all this content in the movie, and like, if you're gonna give us Xenomorph, oh please do. But after how much? But after like the first two acts of the movie, and then they try to cram this much in the third act, it should have been spread out a bit more. Aliens had the action throughout most of the movie. The two acts instead of compressing it into one, and so it just feels like he's piling on a bit. So that's another problem. The movie's a little bit too long, and they could have kind of cut it short. Cut that action sequence short, and then that's where they could have put the prologues in there, and then we would have had a better connection with the characters at the beginning of the story. Even though they're not the main part of the story, still, when people die and all that, you want to feel for them. You want to feel their personality and all that. Because it takes a while to sludge through it to get to the part where you do feel their personality, and then you do empathize with them. So you do eventually get there, but it should have been in the movie. Not to mention, one of the prologues about David and Elizabeth Shaw should have been in there to give a little bit more clarity on the specifics, because David starts talking about sort of what happens or what's happened there, and you really don't know where the placement is. You're like, what is this? Because there's a gap in between the end of Prometheus and then where he's at now. But ultimately, though, it does have a good amount of flaws, and it has some clichédness about it. I'm glad, though, that they brought the Xenomorph back. It's way better than I expected, and it's a great follow-up to Prometheus. It's exactly what anybody who watched Prometheus should have expected from Ridley Scott. And so I'll say it's generally what I expected, but it's better than I expected, though. I was worried that it was going to be terrible, that I was going to hate it as much as I did Prometheus. But he did a better job of it. He seemed to have learned from his mistakes some. Now, of course, people have a problem with a lot of the little bitty things of it, but I think most of this is minor. Because the big thing is the primary story about David. That's the whole thing of it. The movie starts and ends with David. And like I said, it bookends with David. So that's who it's about. That's why the beginning scene is about David. So just keep that in mind when watching it. I mean, it's worth the watch. I mean, just to see some Xenomorph action, to see Michael Fassbender's acting, because that's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Totally gay for him now, like I wasn't before. Haha. No. Regardless, tell me I'm wrong, but I think it's not bad. I would definitely recommend seeing it. Maybe watch it twice, just so you can sort of connect the beginning to the end. It's one of those movies that I would watch twice just for that reason alone. But it's definitely not bad. So all these haters out there, they're saying it's bad, they can go suck a lemon, okay? Because I think it's A-okay. This is me signing off.